Hey everybody, you may or may not know, but I write a column for Photoshop User Magazine called the Photoshop Speed Clinic. And it's just a lot of things to help you work faster inside of Photoshop. Well, recently I did an article on how to create an action that takes guides and puts them into the rule of thirds so you can see the composition in your photos and look for those intersection points, those key points to see where your subject lies inside those photos, and it helps with cropping and just overall composition. Well, as fate would have it, and fate always seems to have it this way, as soon as the articles go to press, you start to think of different ways that you might have done it. And that happened with this one. And then I saw on the NAP member forums, I saw that a NAP member, and I'm not really going to attempt his name here, but a NAP member posted another suggestion or another idea on how to do this. And I gotta say, I kind of like this idea better. So I'm going to show you how to do it. And the reasons why this whole discussion stems from when you create your guides, and that's these little green things you see here. When you create your guides, you go to View, you go to New Guide, and you set it up to 33.3%, and then 66.6%, and you create these guides. Well, if you use this on another sized image, what happens is your action remembers exactly where it put that guide. It doesn't remember put it at 33.3%. It remembers it put it at, 432 pixel point here, and the X and the Y points here. And the way around it really is, if you go into your info palette to palette options, change your ruler units to percent. Okay, and then that way your actions will remember those things. But that's all a moot point at this juncture, because I think this other way is really better and you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So let's go jump over into this image here. And I'm going to show you how to create it in an action. And then at the end, I'm going to show you a keyboard shortcut that you don't even need an action for. And that's truly the Speed Clinic, because it takes the actions all out of it. But I want to show you how to make it an action because there's a cool little trick here. So I want to demo that. So we'll call this rule of thirds. I'll hit record. I'm going to go to the edit menu, go down to your preferences, and then go to guides, grid, and slices. And instead of working with guides are those little movable things you put in your image. I'm going to work with the grid area here. And I'm going to set a grid line every 33.3, not millimeters, but percent. Okay? And then once I change my subdivisions from 4, I'm going to change it to 3. Okay? So now I'm going to have 3 subdivisions inside this photo, all 33.3% different from each other. Hit OK. Okay? And now we don't see the grid yet, so what we need to do here is go to the View menu, go to Show, and Show Grid. But watch what happens to my action. I'm going to show this, and it shows me the grid over the photo, but my action didn't get updated. It's not showing the grid, and that's because in the Actions palette you need to go to Insert Menu Item. This is the cool thing I wanted to show you. Insert Menu Item. Now I go to View, Show, and I'll choose Grid, and you see it shows me up there, and I'll hit OK. And then it records it into the action. So there's just a little tip for you when you're making your actions. If you don't see the item get recorded in your actions, sometimes you need to insert a menu item, and that'll take care of it for you. That said, a couple other little things here. If you don't see, what you're looking for here is the dark, solid color lines, not these little dotted lines that you see here, but the dark ones. If you don't see them, go back into your preferences, and then you can change the color from custom to maybe, let's say, red here, and then that might make it a little bit easier for you to see that grid. And obviously the grid's not going to print, so you don't have to worry about it printing. And again, we're just looking for those solid color lines. When I look at this, I think the eyes are a little bit too far down here. They're almost centered. So let's go grab our crop tool. I'm going to select front image, and that's going to keep the aspect ratio of this image here, and I'm just going to crop it, and I'm going to try to position the man's eyes. I'm not even looking at the grid at this point. I'm just kind of generalizing that this looks like a third right around here. Okay, and I'll hit return, and there we go. We see I got pretty close here. You could see that his eyes fall a lot closer to that grid line at the very top here. The other thing I like about it is, watch this. This was before. See my rule of thirds. Okay? And then this is after. this grid automatically reshapes itself based on the size of your photo. So you don't have to rerun an action, which in my previous method you did. So this grid automatically reshapes itself, and I really like that aspect about it because it always keeps that rule of thirds going for me. Now, I know we talked about actions, and I know we talked about a lot of stuff here, but once you go into your preferences, and by the way, after you toggle your grid on, you'll want to go ahead and stop. And let's go ahead and delete all these other little steps in my action. Just drag them to the trash can. I forgot to stop. But at this point, just hit the play button, and it'll show the grid, hide the grid, show, hide, whatever you want to do. But here's where I think the real speed clinic aspect of this comes in, and that is forget about the action. Okay, we don't even need to create an action for this. All we need to do is change our grid guides like we did before. Go to the View menu, go to Show, and you see how Grid has a keyboard shortcut, the Control key and the apostrophe key, or the Command key and apostrophe on the Mac. So it's got a shortcut. So instead of worrying about an action, just hit your shortcut. And there we go. Now we got our rule of thirds on here. If I want to hide it, I hide it. But as long as my rulers, my grid, I should say, as long as my grid is always set to this inside of your preferences, and that's sticky, it's not going to go away. As long as it's set there, every time I show and hide my grid in the image, it's always going to show me the rule of thirds. Alright, so here's another crop I might do is, since we've got a lot of extraneous area here, maybe I really just want to crop in on the face. And then there we go. Did a nice little crop in on the face, got rid of all the other area inside the photo, and we still have our rule of thirds grid controlled by one simple keyboard shortcut. So for me personally, I don't use the grid a whole lot here in Photoshop. So I'm okay with leaving it set to that rule of thirds. Some people might not. Some people might use the grid for other things as well, and that's where the action can come in handy, because you'll set your grid and your guides to those settings that we did earlier. But if you don't, if you just use the grid for this rule of thirds, then don't worry about the action. Just make yourself just remember that little keyboard shortcut here, and you can turn it on and off. So many thanks to the NAP members that posted in the forum about the column and kind of spurred this whole update to that Speed Clinic column. So I really appreciate it, and honestly, thanks to that one NAP member, because I do think I like this grid, this rule of thirds grid much better.